Hello and welcome to Reportage with Danish bin Nabi. Today I shall have a discussion about a recently released book, Vajpayee, The Years That Changed India, authored by Private Secretary of Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Mr. Shakti Sinha. The book is an important read to understand India's nuclear tests, Kargil conflict, the Lahore Bus Diplomacy. More importantly, the book also dives deep into the fragile coalition years from 1996 till 1999. The book also talks about Vajpayee relations with the regional leaders like Mamta Banaerjee and Jayalalita. Let's go on and talk to Mr. Sinha about the book. Mr. Sinha, you have not talked about detail in your book about those few hours rather, when Vajpayee decided to go for the nuclear tests. You have quoted Jaswant Singh's chapter in your book, not quoted, you have given a reference to that chapter, but not elaborated on those tense few morning hours. Can you kindly share details with us?
Thank you for that very interesting question. The army had installed a secure line from Pokhran to the Prime Minister's residence. Mr. Vajpayee had just shifted to the official residence because it took some time for the house to be ready. Now, in the guest house of the complex, it's called the Prime Minister's residence. There's a residence building, there's a guest house, and there's an office building. Also exactly same bungalows, but this is how it is used. So in the guest house, in the drawing dining room, this control room was set up, so to say, where the Prime Minister, senior ministers like the Home Minister Advani ji, Defense Minister George Fernandez, Deputy Chairman Planning Commission Jaswant Singh, the Finance Minister Yashwant Sinha, then the senior bureaucrats like Principal Secretary Brajesh Mishra, the Cabinet Secretary, the Foreign Secretary, they were all there and I was there. And we were waiting for the phone. The first news was not very good because the wind directions had changed. And there was a fear that it could affect some fallout, to radiation. So obviously it had to be held up. Only by late afternoon was the conditions okay. And the scientists on the site from the BRC went ahead and completed the test. And then they just sent a message, a simple 2-3 word message, test done successfully. And that was conveyed by Brajesh, who picked up the phone, Brajesh Mishraji, to everybody. And the feeling on the room was electric. It was tense. It was happy. It was satisfaction. It was not just thumping triumphalism, but it was a quiet sense of fulfillment, a sense that the country needed to do the test and we have done the test. So obviously joy that we have done the test, that our government has done the test, which should have been done much earlier on. So this combination of happiness, sense of responsibility, a sense of uncertainty, what will happen next. But yes, overall a feeling of joy. But as I said, a very understated, a very mature kind of a happiness that I saw at that moment.
Mr. Sinha, you have also given a reference of Vajpayee's poem on Hiroshima, titled Hiroshima Kipida, where he bitterly was against using of or going for the nuclear tests. But wasn't this a contradiction? Then he went ahead with nuclear tests.
No, in fact, it was exactly the same sense. The first point was nuclear weapons should be banned, completely banned. That was India's first option. India had argued for it for 40 years, that the world should do away with nuclear weapons. But you had the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty, which basically said that those of us who have nuclear weapons, the major powers and China, would have it, others would not have it. That we felt was indefensible. So number one, nuclear apartheid was not acceptable to us. And number three, and more important, the China-Pakistan nuclear and missile cooperation, well documented, read Andrew Small's book, read others, Jane's, a lot of other work, very well documented, was a threat to India. And therefore, we made it clear that our testing is necessary because of our defensive requirements. And as soon as we tested, we said we will not use nuclear weapons against a non-nuclear weapon state. No first use. We were very clear that nuclear weapons for us is the last option. We didn't want it. We were forced to have it. do away with everybody's nuclear weapons, India will be the first country to agree with it. But you cannot allow somebody whose occupation of your territory, somebody who two countries, both your neighbors, north and your west, have this massive nuclear and missile cooperation, and you sit back and let them be. So India had to correct the situation. But yes, the Hiroshima poem makes it clear that he felt it was a terrible thing, that the use of nuclear weapons was awful. And he says, I wonder how the scientist who made this weapon could sleep peacefully. So, it's a last option. Unfortunate.
Mr. Sinha, after few days, Vajpayee traveled to the Pokhran site along with all of you.
Yeah.
Among those people, Dr. Farooq Abdullah was also with them. And you write, and I quote, Farooq Abdullah led the cheering brigades whose Josh made all of us forgot the unbearable heat of Pokhran.
Yes.
Mr. Sinha, what did actually Farooq Abdullah do there?
No, the site, you had to visit the site to show to the world that you're part of it, that it is not an odd incident. It's a very major event. But he wanted a bigger team. He wanted more people involved. So the local Congress MP, Colonel Sonaram, he was also brought to the site. It was a national event. Farooq Abdullah had to be brought. He was there. George Fernandez was there. And of course, as I mentioned, the most vociferous voice with the soldiers, because the soldiers guarding the place, the scientists were there from BRC, everybody. There's a big crowd there.
Farooq Abdullah made you forget the unbearable heat of Pokhran. What did Farooq Abdullah do there?
Yes, because no, the Josh with which he was rallying everybody and shouting slogans, Jai Hind and Bharat Mata Ki Jai and all that. That was, it was such unbearable. I've never seen before or after such heat as I saw in Pokhran that day. But this joy and this Josh that was exuberated by everybody, exuberation. So that temporarily made you forget the unbearable heat. That's all I meant. It is just a passing statement.
Farooq Abdullah gave the slogans Bharat Mata Ki Jai, Jai Hind at the Pokhran site. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely right.
You have also talked about the Nawaz Sharif and Vajpayee bonhomie. There is also a popular perception that Nawaz Sharif was closer to India. Do you think that cost him his prime ministership? Being close to India?
The reality was Nawaz Sharif was not at all close to India. Nawaz Sharif possibly realized, and he made it clear, that if Pakistan has to grow economically, the life of the people made better, then Pakistan would have to reduce the security expenditure. And the only way Pakistan could reduce its security expenditure was entering into good relations with India. He was pro-Pakistan, not pro-India. He realized that the amount of resources of Pakistan that goes to the defense is very, very high, leaving no money for other requirements like education and health. And therefore, but the perception was because he wants to make up with India, not because he's pro-India, he's pro-Pakistan. But those in Pakistan who benefit financially, very substantially, from the anti-India rhetoric could not allow improvement of relationship with India. So it is they who spread this rumor that he's pro-India. I mean, why should he be pro-India? India won't give him one vote even, India could not sustain him in power. He has thrown out so many times. So he was basically a businessman who realized that good economics requires peace. Good economics cannot accept wars and tensions.
And you have written that his 1997 election campaigning was all about having good relations with India.
Yeah. In fact, not just 1999, even if I remember the elections of 2000. Yeah, 97. And again, the elections when Zardari came to power and Benazir lost her life. That election and the next elections, both the leading political parties of Pakistan, then PPP and PML, said, we need good relations with India. Neither are pro-India. They are doing that because they wanted to reduce the role of the Pakistani army and reduce the defense expenditure of Pakistan, which is many times more than its requirements. And therefore, they wanted good relations with India so that economically Pakistan could grow.
You have also written that he changed Gawhar Ayub Khan as his foreign minister and put Sartaj Aziz there instead of Gawhar Ayub Khan.
Yeah, absolutely. Gawhar Ayub was a hawk, remains a hawk. I remember in Delhi also he had made strong statements. Sartaj Aziz, on the other hand, old civil servant, a very sound economist, a very sound economist. But if you read him even today, and his book came out last year, very strong Pakistani patriot. Pashtun, very strong Pakistani patriot. So he was not replacing Gawhar Ayub with somebody who's pro-India, but somebody again who understood the economic necessity of peace in the neighborhood, of peace in the subcontinent.
You also write about the Lahore Bus Diplomacy. Where did actually it all started? Was it the New York when Vajpayee met Nawaz Sharif, or before that? Where did it actually propped up?
It propped up in the New York meeting only, where Nawaz Sharif mentioned that in 1982 he had come to Delhi by car from Lahore with his wife to watch the Asian Games. And then the discussion started, why can't people cross the border easily? And therefore the next thing was, let us start a bus trip. But it was just broad ideas being discussed. Can we start a bus from Delhi to Lahore? People can easily go on a daily basis to make things easier for people on both sides to travel up and down. These are all confidence-building measures to tell each other's people that we are not threat to each other. We can live as neighbors peacefully. And that's how the discussion started. And of course, culminated in the actual announcement and the actual launch of the bus service.
You have also mentioned about the grandson of Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Was it your fault to not take him along on that bus? Where you have used the word, it would have been a coup.
Yeah, it would have been. It would have been definitely, but we had not discussed it. And basically, because the Prime Minister was very busy then. We had traveled in between to Jamaica for the G15, to Trinidad, to Morocco. Domestic issues going on, Bihar tensions are going on, massacres of Dalits going on. Then demands of the state for more funds. So we had a meeting of the National Development Council one day before the Lahore Yatra. So a lot of pressure on Prime Minister. And 2-3 of us were actually preparing the list and getting approved. Somehow, maybe his name would never have been there, but we didn't even suggest the name. We should have suggested the name at least of Mr. Nasri Wadia, Muhammad Ali Jinnah's only grandson, only grandchild. That's why I said, had we taken in Lahore and showed, this is your Quaid-e-Azam, the creator of Pakistan's grandson, an Indian. So, that way, in that sense, psychologically, or the publicity or a PR method, I think it would have been very good. But that's past tense.
But do you now regret that you forgot taking him along?
Yeah. That's why I've written in the book. It was a slip up on my part. I forgot the name of Mr. K.C. Pant for the Pokhran visit of May 18th, 1998, and definitely the name of Nasri Wadia for the Lahore meeting. We should have thought of these names. It was a slip.
When you reached Lahore, everyone amongst the Pakistani establishment was there, but not the Benazir Bhutto. How do you rate Benazir Bhutto as a politician? Rather, how do you view her policy towards India?
Please remember, the entire Kashmir Day observation in Pakistan was started by Benazir. See, Benazir's problem was she had to tell the people of Pakistan and the Pakistani army, don't worry on security, I'm on your side. I will not try to undercut you. And therefore, she sent a message that she wanted to meet, but the signals were bad, etc. She could not come to Lahore, etc. But later on in her life, she did realize, and she regretted, and she publicly has said it also in interviews, that yes, we should have done more to improve relations with India. And in fact, again, as I said, the last campaign that she was a part of was very specifically, she had mentioned that India and Pakistan have to live and work together. So she did later in life realize that trying to be an hawk and therefore creating the Taliban in Afghanistan, on the Kashmir issue, on everything else, her playing of the word Jagmohan's name and saying that Jag, that. So everybody knows that at that moment she was politically weak, possibly immature, and therefore wanted to show that I'm very strong on national defense. I will not compromise with India. So she had that public persona at that moment.
Mr. Sinha, whom do you think would have worked better for India as far as Kashmir is concerned? Nawaz Sharif or Benazir Bhutto?
I think together. Had they been together on this at the same time, each of them wanted to do it, but at a time when they were in power, not when they were in opposition. Remember the Benazir's first stint when Rajiv Gandhi had gone to Islamabad. The Bonhomie then was very strong, but Pakistani army would never allow a Bonhomie. Had the two of them at that stage been able to work it out, I think things would have been different. But today I'm convinced no Prime Minister of Pakistan can do anything about improving relations with India, because the Pakistani army simply cannot allow normalcy with India. If they allow normalcy with India, then the huge absorption of resources from the Pakistani society that Pakistani army gets, all in the name of national defense, will be questioned. They'll be forced to become a normal army, and therefore they would not allow it to happen.
Mr. Sinha, my two last observations of your book. First, why there is no or very less mention of LK Advani right from 96 up until 2004 in your book?
See, I'm describing what are the major things happening in that period. It's a very detailed book, if you notice. It's 350 pages of just 18 months, right? Mm-hmm. Now, what are the main things happening that I mentioned? One was the government formation and handling allies, where Mr. Advani's name comes up again and again. So domestically, he comes up again. Mm-hmm. But the others were Pokhran. Mm-hmm. Others were outreach to Pakistan. Mm-hmm. Third was outreach to the United States, which was US-India natural allies. Mm-hmm. And the fourth was the Kargil war itself. Mm-hmm. In all these four, Mr. Advani did not have a major role to play.
Not even in the Lahore Bus Diplomacy. There was absolutely no role of Advani in that as well.
No, they must have discussed at certain stage, but by the time Shekhar Gupta's interview of Express appears in the morning, Mr. Vajpayee in Lucknow is informed about it, and he announces at the press conference, "I'm going to Lahore." He had no time to consult anybody else. So in that sense, the decision was his at that moment. I'm sure when he came back, he must have discussed it. I'm sure of that. But, the Advani Vajpayee story in the terms of controversies, which starts appearing in the newspapers, appeared after this book's period is over. During this duration, there was not even a public hint that the two were not on the same page. And which is why, having seen so many meetings, and I can't tell what happened in the meeting because a secret, the cabinet meeting or anything, the relationship between the two came out across as very warm. Of course, they were to discuss things, but it was never a contentious relationship. For that, there are others who are writing about it, and especially the period after 2000. So my book definitely would not have too much of Mr. Advani, because simply in these issues, Mr. Advani did not have a major role to play. That's all, nothing else.
Mr. Sinha, my last question. If Vajpayee would have the majority in the parliament, do you think he would have abrogated special status of Jammu and Kashmir? And do you think his government would have influenced the highest court as far as the Babri Masjid is concerned?
One, I don't know where the question is coming from. Because two reasons. One is purely hypothetical. And second, the Supreme Court one, I disagree with you, but I'll leave it at that. Please remember, Mr. Vajpayee started his political career in the Janasangh as secretary to his president, Shyama Prasad Mukherjee. He accompanied Shyama Prasad Mukherjee up to the borders of the then state of Jammu and Kashmir. And Shyama Prasad Mukherjee told Vajpayee, you go back and continue the struggle. Mr. Vajpayee was against 370 from day one. And in fact, in 98, when the government was formed and opposition taunted him in parliament, what happened? Where is your Article 370? Where is Ram Janambhoomi? Where is your Uniform Civil Code? He's saying we don't have the numbers. That's all he said. So he did not say we are dropping the agenda. He was not saying, he simply said, I don't have the number. Would he have done it in this manner or that manner? I cannot say. Because the way it was done, nobody thought it is possible to, it is still there. Article 370 is still in the Constitution of India, but effectively abrogating it through a method that was used was completely a novel method, which had not been even thought of before, So whether this would have happened in that manner or not, I really can't say. But yes, on one hand, Mr. Vajpayee was very open to discussing with all sections of Kashmiri society, the valley. At the same time, he was always against Article 370. He believed that Kashmir was a very important part of India and should be completely integrated with the rest of the country.
Mr. Sinha, pleasure talking to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.